me for an inspirational interview where I share with you stories of ordinary people who have crafted their route of escape from the 9 to 5. And today my guest is Steve Munroe, the founder of Cubicle and former employee with the United Nations. That really enjoyed his work, but couldn't see a sustainable future for himself after he became aware that he did not want the life that his superiors in the company had, which is a really good clue that we all should probably look around when we're in a job we hate. So with 2 kids in tow and his wife, Steve traveled to seek a sabbatical that would change his perspective of work forever. So I'm really excited for this story because I really love the story of this man. But thank you for coming and sharing your story with us, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Lydia, and hi, everyone.
And I know that we're on different time zones right now, so that's why it looks a lot darker over where you are than where I am. But you are Canadian, just like I am. And how long ago, was the year that you quit your job?
I quit my job with the UN in 2009. So that was, I guess, about 7 years ago.
Right. And what did you do at the UN? What was your position, before being a post-Cubicle survivor?
I was a project manager for projects in what they call crisis and conflict countries. My last job was as the program manager for landmine clearance in Cambodia.
Wow. So risky job for your life.
I had a very dangerous job sitting behind a desk delegating. I probably did, I guess. I had trouble getting private insurance. So I guess my job was more dangerous than most, but yes.
And you had to wear the bomb suit and all that jazz.
I wore the bomb suit and all that jazz if I was walking around hopefully cleared minefields. Yeah.
Right. So this is obviously, working for the UN, this is a dream for some people, right? And you've been with them for, how long were you working with the UN?
About 10 years altogether.
Right. So that's quite a long commitment to a career. And so when was that point for you where you stopped and thought, maybe this life that I'm leading, creating right now in the UN and whatever else that was happening in your personal life at that time isn't the right path, and what needed to change when that moment happened?
Right. Well, I think it came in 2 phases. So part of it was personal, part of it was professional. So it was all in the context of me having been offered another job, which was, infinitely less interesting and exciting than the job I was doing, which I loved it. I loved the job I was doing, but it was the right career move. And I had kind of very clear career objectives that I wanted to meet. Now, at the same time, we'd been having a lot of health issues in Cambodia, which is where we were living. And my eldest son at the time, he was around 4 years old, got a very, very severe case of strep, which turned into rheumatic fever. And it spread to his heart, and we had to go to Singapore, and it was, really, really scary. And a bit of the straw that broke the camel's back, where, we had just been having this kind of recurring health issues again and again and again. And so we were kind of throwing our hands up with Cambodia first, saying, we got to get here. But when we really started thinking about leaving and why we would leave and where we would go, our first thought was we need to leave this place.
Right.
But the more we started thinking about it, the more we I guess became honest with ourselves that it wasn't only the health issue, right? That was kind of giving us this push that we needed to say, is this really what we want to do? So I've been, over the 5 months or so it took the UN to kind of get its act together around this job, I had the thought kind of crept into my head one day that was really the one that ended my career, which was, I'm on track to hit my target, but am I still happy with that target, right? And that's when I kind of looked around at other, say, country directors or senior level managers that I was kind of aspiring to be in 5 to 8 years, and didn't see a lot that, other than the ego side of things, and the
status,
the status and financial reasons to some degree, but even that wasn't huge. I think honestly, it's more status and ego, right? And wanting to advance for the sake of advancement. But when I looked around and I saw peers that were in those positions, there was a lot of divorce, a lot of kind of quiet, what felt a little bit like quiet misery, to be honest.
Right.
It looked good, sounded good, but probably rang a little hollower than you would think. So
Yeah,
So
I had a really similar background myself because I was about to be, voted in as one of the youngest partners for the company I was working for. At 26 or 27, I was at the time. I was like, holy crap, this is the most I've ever been paid. This is amazing. I'm not even 30 yet. And I'm going to be a partner. But I did exactly what you did, was that I was at a conference and I looked around and I actually asked a question to someone who'd been in the industry for 25 years, which is international education, where I was from. And I was like, if you go back in time 25 years later, would you still do this job? Because it looked glamorous on paper. We were traveling all the time, living out of really fancy hotels. He's like, no, I just went in too deep and then I got caught up into it. And then now I'm like on the verge of a divorce because I'm on the road so much. So that's a good clue as to like, even though the money could sound really good at this moment in time and the status, is this a long-term gain, right? Like, can you, if there's no one that you can be proud of to see and you go, wow, I really want to be like that person, that should be one of the alarm bells that causes a bit of questions. So then what happened after that? So once that kind of situation happened with your son, which caused that turning point to almost come to life a lot faster than before, how was the conversation that you had with your wife, your children, around taking those next steps?
At that stage, it was probably more a conversation with my wife than our children. I mean, it's a little bit different now when we have these family discussions, right? Because our kids are old, right? Now 10, 12. So at that time, they were 2 and 4. But we went on a little family holiday. We went to Thailand next door, and it took us about a minute and a half to decide. And I think that the health thing was a big scare, because as a parent, that trumps a lot of things when you feel like I'm endangering the health of my child. I mean, it's kind of hard to get over that, no matter what the job looks like or sounds like, right? So I think that was a big part of it. But when we started thinking about, when we got into life together, I guess as a family, we met fairly early, and when we thought about what we wanted to do in the world and be in the world and bring to the world, when we thought about the actual work we spent most of our time doing, it wasn't necessarily lining up, right? Like it made a great story. I have the best job title at a dinner party. The Facebook feed looks very intoxicating and exciting and sexy, and everybody's just like, wow. We'd come back to Canada and we'd have friends who, would, within 3 minutes of seeing each other, they would start kind of explaining their lives to us. Well, you have to understand, we'd make people feel uncomfortable because our lives on the surface look so amazing and rich and fulfilling. And this is the kind of trap we all get into, right? So, it didn't take very long, considering the magnitude of the decision. I mean, we were locked in, we were kind of contributing to a pension plan. We had we had the next 20 years mapped out, no problem. And so, or 30 years, for that matter. But it took a very short time. And I think it was because, I think the health issue gave us the ability to kind of, not make it about ourselves and our own kind of career aspirations and our own things. And so that gave us a bit of permission to have the conversation honestly, right? So what would it look like if we left? Well, maybe we have to leave Cambodia at least, and maybe we leave further and actually do something totally different. What would that look like? Right. And and as soon as we had that conversation, those times in your life when you're like, ding, like, you even if you try to put it back in the can, it's like, you can't. It's out there. If somebody else has heard you, which is even worse, because now you're like, it's like, now you have to live up to it. I didn't really think that or feel like that. And so we went back, and within a week of that conversation, I had given my resignation. Renee, my wife, had given hers as well. I think we stayed another 4 months or something, like we finished our contracts and waited till we got new people in and all of that. Right. It wasn't, certainly didn't want to leave the organization in a lurch or the project in a lurch or anything like that. But once it kind of happened, it was very difficult to dial it back, because we knew the sound of truth when we heard it.
Right. Yeah. So it sounded like you and Renee and your wife decided to have this kind of open, transparent conversation around forget about status and forget about responsibilities for a minute. Like, how do we want to experience life? You know, what does that look like? A life that we can be proud of, and to sometimes face the music that maybe what was currently filling our time isn't the thing that's actually that fantasy in our head, and it's not aligning. And then making that choice to you know, not quit in a full hearty way. You know, you gave it a few months to save up money to do the whole transition. And did you ever receive any people in your life? Because I know a lot of families tell me this, you know, especially moms will say when they decide to make this decision and tell everybody that they're not happy with their jobs and they want to start a business and be an entrepreneur, people judge them and go, that's not the responsible thing that parents do. You have to get that secure job, because what about your kids? What if they get sick like yours, you know, then what will happen? So did you have any naysayers, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, we definitely had tons and tons of naysayers, tons.
Right.
Like it's easier to, if I had to identify them, it would be easier to go the other way, you know, and say, who are the 3 people that didn't immediately say you're nuts or irresponsible or,
right.
You know. So yeah, definitely we have lots of that. And I think that is sitting on the other side of it now, that's very understandable, right? Like people, you know, people are fearful. People then are, you know, I think at some point we're all a little bit of pack animals, right? And when, you know, it's scary to kind of separate yourself from people. And that's what it felt like at the time. You know, I think we definitely had people that told us they thought we were being brave, or they told us they wished they could do it, or they told us, you know, they were going to do it in like 3 or 4 years. You know what I mean? We're planning it. And so, you know, I think we got enough nods like that, where we actually knew we weren't. Everybody didn't think we were crazy, but that it kind of, it's affronting for people, right? If they have invested themselves in, for example, this organization. I mean, my boss at UN, I work for UNDP, and my boss said 7 years. She said, after 7 years, you're almost unemployable anywhere else. Once you've been UNDP for that long, because you get into this kind of mindset, right? Yeah. And it's a certain way of doing things, and a certain way of approaching things, a certain risk tolerance, a certain language, and I think there's some truth to that, right? And I was around 7 years with UNDP at that point. I worked with some others as well, and so I think you know, we had to be a little bit careful and a little bit sensitive to that as well, right? To not position it as we're leaving this thing because it's wrong. You know, because we have a lot of friends, and still do, a lot of friends that are still there, and some of them and some of them are seemingly really happy with what they're doing. Others we know are not. But it just wasn't right for us. And that's, you know, and so I think the people understood from the kids' point of view, we're doing it for the kids, you know, they get that, right?
Yeah.
So I think we did that a little bit.
And did you have to kind of have a little think around education for your kids? Because that's one thing that a lot of people are fearful about when it comes to living abroad or quitting their jobs when they have a family, is that, well, what now happens to the education of my kids? Because you're used to putting them into particular schools where they come from. So what is kind of the knowledge gap that some people may have that haven't traveled abroad and want to? Is it safe for children? Are there schools? Are there other children to play with? Or are they going to be like monkeys in a jungle somewhere? And you're going to raise a bunch of Tarzans.
Yeah.
What is the real truth reality?
In the jungle, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, there is, I mean, for us, so we are both Canadian, but we weren't living in Canada when our kids were born, right? So we weren't leaving, let's say that. So we didn't have that set of decisions and that set of things going on, or questions from family or things like that. So yeah, sure. I mean, when we decided to leave the UN and we said, where are we going to go? Right? Because for us, our first question was not what are we going to do? It was where are we going to do it? Right. And so we had this life where we'd basically lived overseas and moved since we were about 20. And it was always like, you know, this is my thing that I do, right? This is my skill set or my job or my title. And so then I would look, where in the world can I go to do that thing? Right? Who will hire me in Tanzania or in Sudan or in Indonesia or wherever to do this thing? Then we had to kind of look at it differently and say, where do we want to be? And then what can we do to allow that to happen, to make that possible, right? So it was kind of going place first. And so for us, you know, we traveled around a lot, and we, you know, through a long process, narrowed it down to 2 places, Vancouver or Ubud, Bali, which is where we ended up moving and eventually opening Hubud, which is a big decision for us. You know, were we going to go home, so to speak, to Canada or continue out? And so we decided to continue out. And we looked definitely at schooling options. So, you know, in Bali, there was a number of international schools, but there was also a school called the Green School, which is a very kind of innovative, very green, progressive school around environmental stewardship and global leadership. And they had opened 3 days before we looked online. Like, so we went to Bali and they were like, what kind of schools? And we knew there was the Bali International School and the Mahatma Gandhi School, a bunch of international schools, traditional international schools. And then literally Green School had opened that week. And so it was kind of one of those pieces falling. Yeah, we picked up the phone literally and said, let me ask you a few questions. Okay, sign us up. We'll be there for the next school year. So there's that. But I know this is a question that maybe it's a bigger question with a longer answer, depending on who's listening and who's asking. Because that, for us, I mean, we were probably unlike most people, we had decided we were moving to Bali. And we were going to be there forever until our plans changed, you know? And so, yes, that could be 6 months, but we like bought land there 10 years ago. We were like, we're moving to Bali, right? So I think a lot of people will be in a situation where maybe they're looking at more fluid options. You know, do you want me to touch on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, what are the options out there for families that because I think even for myself, I don't have children yet, but this absolutely affects my own personal choices about where I go, what's responsible. And I think it's about, you know, the education of what's available out there. So what about people that don't want to stay forever in one place? What's the other options around that?
So this year, our family experimented with world schooling, right? So it's kind of homeschooling on the move, right? Okay. And so it's something that I think a lot of people have been doing without calling it anything for some time. You know, I mean, homeschooling families that just happen to have a serious travel issue, of which, you know, we know lots. But this is something that, just like, you know, digital nomads who if you think of as kind of single or couple people not having kids or whatever, are much more location independent. Families are, and you know, there is, I guess, in some ways, more reasons to be fearful or to say, well, we can't because with the kids. Maybe we get on some of those later, but here's a couple of options. So in Bali, I'll give you an example. There is what we call a micro school. There's actually probably 5 of them in Ubud, which is a small town in Bali. So I mean, there are tons of other places in Bali. They're all independent. They're all run by like professional educators. So the one we sent our kids to when they were homeschooling while we were in Bali, he was a teacher at Green School for several years. He's an Australian credentialed teacher for grade 5. And he was kind of doing homeschooling groups. So different, you know, there'd be a bit of a curriculum and there was a bit of a curriculum and a philosophy around it. But different kids were coming in and doing different things. So it was, you know, a lot of people who were either making up their own curriculum, kind of unschooling, they call it, or following curriculums, online curriculums. We did a bit of like mishmash. So we did some stuff with him where the kids would go there 3 mornings a week, interact with other kids, do things that we couldn't do with them for sure. And we didn't, I mean, because I, you know, parents don't typically admit this, but you know, most of them, the idea of like homeschooling for a lot of parents is way more terrifying than anything we're going to talk about today. Terrifying. The idea of being alone with their kids and
that many hours in a day.
That many hours. And what do they do? And my kids don't listen to me. They got to, you know, somebody else, they listen to other people, but not to me, all of these things. So, you know, so we, I would say we crowd schooled our kids more than homeschooled, right? More than us sitting with the math book, so to speak. So there was tons of educational resources available in Bali, and Bali is not unique. So when we went to Mexico for a couple of months. We did traveling through Uzbekistan, Greece, Georgia, and we kind of, you know, had a bit of a base curriculum that we took with us, and then did kind of place-based learning with educators in those countries. And so I mean, there's way more people doing it than you think, and there are communities of people springing up literally everywhere. Look up world schoolers, you'll see them. It's just starting to get language around it. It's probably like Digital Nomads was 2 or 3 years ago. Absolutely happening, and you will not be doing it alone.
Yeah, I think that's a good advice to kind of search out before you leave wherever your home country is to look at the options and start talking to people who are the families and already on the road, and that can give you advice, because I think a lot of the times we spend so much time trying to research all sorts of things, and the internet's such a crowded place of information. And sometimes it's just easier to talk to a human and go, how was your experience here? And I'm assuming there's like Facebook groups or websites with group forums that people can look at and start to do a bit of research on their own. Great.
Two things. If I can say two more quick things. One about that. One, sometimes we get overwhelmed, and as you said, the internet's a very crowded place, and we look at, blah, blah, blah. There are too many things to look at. I think sometimes it's helpful when you're starting from kind of a fearful place of, I want to do this thing, but I'm afraid to do it because I'm afraid of basically breaking my kid. Right? I'm going to pull him out of school in grade 2 or grade 7 or whatever it is. I'm going to take him. He's going to fall behind. He's going to be this. He's going to blah, 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 blah. Right? And these things we tell ourselves. If we start with just a much simpler kind of premise, which is, there is just a plethora of issues with the education system in any of the countries that probably most of these listeners are coming from, right? There's bullying, there's overcrowded classrooms, there's teaching to tests, there is just an explosion of kind of learning differences, learning challenges, unmet educational needs. So, I don't want to say the educational system is broken, but let's say there's millions of people that say the educational system is broken. So what I'm saying is you're not necessarily taking him or her out of a perfect situation into an unknown situation. You're taking them out of, in a lot of cases, a really mediocre and not necessarily healthful situation into a potentially incredible situation that's an opportunity for you and your kids and your family to grow together. So reframe the question a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And what that's the last question, actually. I'm glad you talked about kind of one of those fears around education and changing your mindset and perspective around this question. But as a family, you've met people on the road. You obviously, having this co-working space that you guys have created together at Ubud, get a lot of families probably coming to you and go, oh my God, is this even possible? Like, this sounds completely like a dream. It doesn't seem practical, is it for every single family? And so, knowing these conversations that come up, what fears do you think people have? What are the common fears they have when they're thinking of taking the leap with a family in tow? And what's your advice around overcoming these fears? So it might be something that you and your wife have started to practice doing that creates, much nicer environments for you guys to have conversations. Because I know a lot of couples have a hard time telling the spouse that this is what they want to do. So what's your advice around families that want to take the leap and how to overcome the common fears?
Well, I think common fears with kids is one thing, and there's, I think, a couple of main areas. There's health. So I'm going to take them to countries that may or may not have the same healthcare system, levels of hygiene, et cetera, et cetera. So, there might be some concerns there. My experience with people is that you get over that fairly quickly, right? That fear, like when we moved to Uzbekistan for the first time in 2001, and my mother decided she was going to come and visit me, and she was kind of really terrified about the idea of going to Uzbekistan, even though she never heard of it until I moved there and didn't know where it was or why she should be terrified. And I said, Mom, the idea of being in Uzbekistan is way weirder than actually being in Uzbekistan, right? Like, you're there, you're like, hey, this is great, I love it. And it's a little bit like that with fears around really obvious, like cleanliness things and things like that. It's really manageable, I think. So more so than others. You get good health insurance. And so, for me, the big thing is always like, if something really bad happens, there's a bad accident or something like that, where, I want to, without any financial fear, hop on a plane, go somewhere and get the best care possible. I insure myself like that. That's the main thing. Because other services like, getting your teeth cleaned, stuff like that, it's great. It's cheap, way cheap.
That's right.
So, there's that, I think, around health issues. There's the education issues, which I've kind of touched on a little bit, where like there's great options out there, tremendous opportunities online, and tons of really cool families doing it that you will meet on the road. So, fears around homeschooling and education and taking more ownership of your child's education. I think the fear is typically my kids will be alone. They won't be with people. Me and my kids will fight. I mean, what we found is, and I think we're a fairly normal family in terms of, we fight, I don't know, more or less. But we had that fear when we said, okay, let's take off for 4 months and float around Central Asia. it was incredible. I mean, it was everything we could have hoped it to be in terms of like a bonding, awesome experience. So, you know, I think, you know, if you're going in and hanging out in different places, you will find ways for your kids to have space and you to have space. And I think it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, I think around, you know, will our kids be lonely, or I don't know. I mean, I think,
or will they be screwed up once they go back to the first world, and can they integrate back, you know, into normal life? That's something that I know I get asked a lot.
Yeah. I'll be honest, people that have, I would say, been out and around for a long time, you know, like say friends of mine that grew up as children of diplomats, things like that. They would say it's like, I'll give you an example. So my son is 12 and we're in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is where my wife's family is from. We come here every summer. It's very familiar to him. He loves it here, blah, blah, blah. And so we have them this week in a camp at the UBC campus in Kelowna doing some kind of science thing. And he really kind of latched onto this kid. And so it was his best friend for the week. And you know, they're like this, they're brothers, and, you know, and now I'm sure he'll never mention them again, but, you know, fast friends as kids can be.
Right.
And so I said, why do you like him so much? And he said, well, you know, because he's also from somewhere else. And I don't know where he's from. He's not, I guess, living in Kelowna, where I guess a lot of the other kids are, and they know each other for a long time. And so, you know, is that a possibility that they come back? I mean, if they go for a few months or something, it's not like that, but they go for 3, 4, 5 years or longer or more. Do they then come back? And is there a difference between them and kids that have never left that same place? There is a difference. There is a difference. And so, you know, I mean, and I would argue maybe there's benefits as well, right? So it's a question of if you know, if that's a concern.
Well, you have to, I think, calculate, do the pros outweigh the cons, right? I think what every decision we make in life is none of it is all pro. You know, there's always be the cons as well, but which one is better or worse that we have to decide, you know? And I think that once, you know, we have that transparent conversation with our families and our spouses, then we can make better decisions on, at least we know why we're doing this, but we're willing to take the risk, right? We're willing to exchange a secured, clean, friendly environment with something unknown, because here's the other thing that we're striving for, right? Here's the other reward that we can't receive in the first world or wherever we may come from, right? Awesome. And obviously from your travels and your experience being a nomad and building a business abroad and being with a family, there's lots of resources that you've created as part of your company, Hubud. So where can people find more information about living in Bali, you know, landing in Bali, what do I do when I first land, maybe some resources you may have already, that you have around transitions or families. Where can people find more information around that online that you're associated with?
Okay. Well, at Hubud, you know, we get about 80 to 100 new people every month. So in terms of once people get here and integrate or show up at our door, basically, there's lots of stuff we do to help people with that.
Just in case the audience don't know what Hubud is a co-working space in Ubud. There's a little bit of tongue twister. Ubud with an H.
Ubud with an H, yes. It confuses Balinese taxi drivers to no end.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a co-working space in Bali. It's a very busy one. So we have people from all over the world and lots of people that you know, it's a bit of a laboratory for a lot of the people that you're connecting with and working with, right? That they come here and this is how they transition into something different. So we have a lot of experience with that. And what a lot of people find when they get there is they have this feeling of, for the first time, for a lot of them, wow, I'm not alone, right? So I've been told I'm crazy. I've been explaining myself to my parents, friends, bosses, etc. for years, and I feel so weird about it, and I feel so grateful, and I feel all these things, and I show up, and all of a sudden, all these people are like, "What took you so long?" You know?
Yeah. I'm not the only crazy one.
Not the only crazy one. No, and after a while, you realize that everybody else is crazy. So
yes.
So that's obviously the big resource, and you know, if people make it there, we've developed a couple of things, you know, a guide to going location independence, as well as a guide for people that are coming to Bali. Those are both free and on our website at hubud.org. Two things we do specifically around transitioning, kind of little idea, big idea. So the little idea is the soft landing package. People come to Bali, and, you know, for a lot of people, different reasons. Some of them because they're showing up with family. Others are coming for a month or something, and they just want to focus on kind of working or doing whatever it is that they're in Bali to do. So we do a soft landing package, which is kind of like a flat fee thing where we take care of everything. You show up at the airport and you don't think about you know, anything from laundry, food, co-working.
Right, so everything's planned out, accommodation.
SIM card, scooter lessons. I mean, the whole bit. Really just
important things.
We'll take care of it. We'll make you feel welcome. We'll introduce you to who you need, and you're off to go. So this is number one. Number two is something I'm super, super excited about, which we're just launching now, and it will be happening in about 2 months. So it's called Women in Transition. It is I want to say, and I hope I'm right, approximately a 10-week course.
Yes.
That is running in Bali starting in September. And the idea is it's helping women that are transitioning both to life in Bali, or kind of life on the road, as well as into entrepreneurship. So they'll be meeting tons of great female entrepreneurs from in and around the island. And
one of them is me. They'll meet me on the first week.
Absolutely. They'll meet you. And
I'm on September 5th, whoever's coming to Bali.
That's right. So don't be late.
Don't be late.
But we kind of kept seeing this again and again, this desire for people to have accountability, support on the technical stuff, support on the social stuff of, okay, now I'm here and I'm launching on this life, and I'm maybe launching a new business or expanding my business. And so being able to do that in a kind of a facilitated, safe, supportive way. So that's brand new for us. We are super, super excited about it. And
what's the web link for that?
That is at www.hubud.org/wit, WIT.
Excellent. I'll put the links up as well on the page for this video, just in case we want to visit. Well, thank you so very much for taking time out of your weekend. I know you're having a barbecue in Kelowna, beautiful, sunny Kelowna, BC. And what a great inspirational story around really making your choices that are right for you, choosing yourself, choosing your family, and not being perfect around your decisions, but being able to pivot and learn new things together and bond and have much more of an intimate relationship that I think most of us don't have with our children in regular traditional life. So thanks for
you're too busy.
Yeah, exactly. You're too busy. So I'm always a huge fan of Hubud. So we'll put up the links for hubud.org as well, which is the place that obviously I live and build and have my own community. So thank you for doing what you do and helping us crazies live this amazing adventurous life abroad. So thanks for joining me, Steve.
No worries. Thanks for having me.